Good Monday evening to you all out there. Welcome into another episode of the OBR GameTape. We're your hosts. I'm Jacob. That's Sam. We're back here now for, what are we at? Rookie number 6? We're at rookie number... We're trying to count.
I think I can do that math.
I think so too. I think I should know the answer to that, but I don't. We're back with rookie number 6 here on the OBR GameTape, doing some film breakdowns. Welcome into the OBR streaming network. We got shows for you every day of the week, Monday through Friday. Multiple shows on most days. So make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube. You hit that like button. Give us a follow over there. Sam, how you doing?
Not too bad. Busy, but that's normal. The weather's been very hot, which is negative for me. So that's a bummer.
Air conditioner went out in the house on Wednesday. So yeah, trust me, I'm with you. It's like it took a little while for it to get hot, but it made sure to get hot as soon as my air conditioner wasn't working. We're recording this on Sunday. I got somebody coming to look at it again on Monday morning. So by the time you guys see this, it might be fixed. So we'll see. I wanted real quick before we dive into Dylan Sampson, the second running back that they drafted, and check on that tape. There was just I wrote on this for the website, and make sure you're over there at theobr.com. Sam's been doing a ton of film articles over there, a lot of work on Mason Graham, some Isaiah McGuire stuff, maybe something we'll dive into on this podcast sooner here in a couple of weeks. But some really great stuff from Sam over there in terms of the film room, so make sure you're over there and you check that out for the VIPs. I think it's 60% off an annual subscription to theobr.com. Last I checked on the website, so don't quote me to it, but I do think there's a discount going on there. I wrote on this just an interesting thing. So the Browns, we've now heard from multiple players just during OTAs, and I know that doesn't mean a ton because they don't have pads on, but we've heard now from Grant Delpit on talking to Andrew Siciliano. He's another guy that's come out and said, hey, the intensity's different. Like, we've ratcheted it up. Like, we are going out, and Pete Smith has talked about this a ton, and I know Brad has, and we've talked about it on this show. We're talking about, getting more reps for the quarterbacks and things like that. The way to do that is to be more intense. The NFLPA, and get more reps in the time that you're allowed. The NFLPA put out that report card last year, and there was a part in there that said that they didn't know that time management was a strength of this coaching staff, that maybe the time wasn't used properly. And now they're going out there and they're trying to change that. If they're being more intense, and that means they're probably going quicker, getting more reps in, they're maximizing their time. That's what they got to do so that they're not a 3-win team again. Like, don't do the same thing you were doing last year, which is something Delpit talked about. He was like, it wasn't good enough. And then they broke ground on Area 46 to try to expand the facility, and they made a massive wave of changes to the training staff, which we've had we've led the league in injury report for what feels like a decade now. And so they made a bunch of changes, and on top of that, it wasn't just changing who was on the staff, they increased the staff, which was another complaint on the NFLPA, where they were like, there's not enough training staff. So I'll kick it over to you. I know it's not a huge deal because it's just OTAs, but like it's relatively significant that, in my opinion, and I want to see if you agree, that they're listening to the players and they're making sure to not repeat the same mistakes 2 years in a row.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I would say, a big indicator of a staff that recognizes that they need to make significant changes, that what they've been doing isn't working, and they have to get better in those areas. And like you said, it is OTAs, like it's still early, but I think it's an encouraging sign because, at least to me, it doesn't necessarily make sense for them to implement that stuff in OTAs and then not do that in training camp and practice through the regular season. So yeah, I think it's the start of a pretty big philosophy shift, and I would expect that to pay off once the season comes around.
Yeah, it would be really silly if you made these sweeping changes during the voluntary parts of the off season and then didn't do it during the mandatory camps this week. And I'm fingers crossed that Deontay Johnson shows up, because otherwise I think you need to make a move at wide receiver. All right, let's dive into it. Let's talk about Dylan Sampson. Next week we'll finish out the rookie film breakdowns, as we'll hit Shadur Sanders, as I'm sure a lot of people are looking forward to that one. We'll see how the comments are to us when we do that. That'll be an interesting one to follow out. So Dylan Sampson, part of the appeal for me was pairing him with Quinshon Judkins, because once you have that full picture, it makes me like the Quinshon Judkins pick even more, because you've got a home run threat. And not that Judkins isn't, but Sampson's going on another level with his speed. He is significant, it's just a different level. Not that Judkins is slow, it's just there's some elite speed there from Dylan Sampson. But it makes me like the Sampson or both picks more. Like, I like Judkins knowing I've got this in my back pocket, and I'm even more content having Samson on my team, knowing I don't have to try to use him as a blocker, and I don't have to try to use him as a short yardage back. Like, I have someone else for that, which I think really well rounds the room. And that's why I loved this pick so much when it happened, was like, okay, putting it in conjunction with what they did, taking Samson or Judkins at 36. This is great. I really like this. This is a complete, well-rounded room, and I'm very excited. So you kind of on the same page there, and then kind of talk about some of what you like about Dylan Sampson.
Yeah, I think throughout the whole process, I think, you and I and probably most other people were wanting them to take two running backs just to add some more life to that room, regardless of how the Nick Chubb situation ended up turning out. They just needed some young guys in there. They needed some more playable bodies, and I think they got them for sure. We already talked about how good Judkins is. And Samson, I think, brings something a little bit different. He's not necessarily like a huge speed back or someone who's going to break off these long runs, but I think he's an extremely solid player that I think presented fantastic value where they got him in the fourth round. I don't think the majority of people expected him to go that late. I think he was more of like a late second, early third round kind of guy. Probably pre-draft, we would have been pretty satisfied, knowing he would be there at 65, right? And they ended up getting him way later than that. So he's a guy who he's smaller, but he doesn't necessarily play like a smaller back. He's not a power back, but he's not a guy who you kind of feel like struggles because of his size, right? He's got a little bit of power to his frame. He usually falls forward. Probably one of the biggest things that I took away from watching him was he rarely goes down. He's really tackled by the first person to have a shot at him, right? Even if it's not this huge gain, he's almost always making at least one person miss and then, getting that extra yard or two, which was a big thing we talked about with Judkins, where this team needed that, and they wanted that from the running backs because of how things have gone the past couple of years. So, good change of pace from Judkins. I think they're going to work well in tandem. I think they do some similar things, but then they also have their own individual strengths. And I think it's going to be a good room. And I think, Samson is going to end up being a very productive player, especially considering where they took him.
Yeah, I think I had him 50. If I remember correctly, I had him 50 on my big board. Like I had him up there because I remember saying that on draft day and Brad Ward being like, whoa, you had him that high. I didn't realize that. And I'm like, yeah, I thought that part of these guys would slide a little bit because of how good the class was, where it was like, yeah, I might have him at 50, but I thought he was going to go in the maybe early third. That's kind of where I thought he was actually going to go. Just because there was an abundance of backs, I thought it would push guys down because teams wouldn't feel as inclined to have to take one early. It's like, you don't have to take one in the second round because you're going to get a Dylan Sampson in the fourth, and then something like that played out. Like me and you talked about that a bunch when we were doing the mock drafts here on Monday night, like leading up to it. It was like, yeah, like that's just kind of what we thought. See, with Samson, what I think is really interesting, you talk about he doesn't really play. There's aspects of his game that I see that look like a smaller back, but I'm with you in the sense that there's a lot of aspects that I don't. His contact balance, I think, is very important. He's not Pierre Strong. Like a strong gust of wind will blow Pierre Strong over. Like
Yeah.
he doesn't stay upright. And with Samson, it's like I don't think he's a super, like you said, he's not a power back, so he's not like super like powerful in the lower half and strong. But like if you clip him, his athleticism kicks in and he just kind of wiggles around and he just goes ahead and gets another yard or two. And you're like there's a play where he does it in here. Like, I don't like him lowering my shoulder and lowering his shoulder, running at defensive tackles, because he gets stonewalled. Like, he's not going through their chest. Like, he's not doing that. But if you're a defensive back or a linebacker who thinks, oh, here's the little running back, I'm just going to clip him, he's going to lunge forward and get like 2, 3, 4 more yards. You need to like form tackle him or hit him, take him to the ground, because his contact balance and athletic ability shows in that area. I don't love him as a pass blocker, but I don't think he was drafted. I think that's part of why he was drafted where he was. I just think he doesn't have enough power consistently, but he tries. He tries really hard. Like, you don't see him like standing around. Like, even if he doesn't get to a guy, even if he whiffs on him, he's going for it. Like, and I like that aspect of it, because as long as you've got a willingness to do those sorts of things, you can coach them to be better at those sorts of things. And so all around, like, I thought he was a pretty good back. And then when you're telling me that he's the second or third back to complement Judkins and or Ford, I'm like, I love this. Like, in the role they're going to probably have him in, I think he's going to be extremely successful. So let's do it, man. Let's dive in. Put you here in the hot seat and take us through some of this tape.
All right, so I have a couple clips from Florida and then some from Georgia as well. So, again, these are certainly NFL caliber athletes that he's playing, especially in the case of Georgia. So this is stuff that's likely going to be able to translate at a certain level to the NFL. So, so this is what I was talking. This is an example of what I was talking about earlier, where rarely does the first guy who has a shot at him end up making the tackle, at least by themselves. So 24, gets there. He's right there. I know he's getting blocked that way, and Samson sees that, and that's why he makes the cut the way he does. But that's not a great situation for running back to be in, right after you've gotten handed the ball, 4 or 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and he ends up getting back to the line maybe a yard or two. So it's stuff like that where he's adding value in the margins, right? It's not these huge, big, plays, but it's, okay, instead of we lost a yard or two there, we actually gained a yard or two. And I think that's incredibly valuable if you're able to do that consistently. Because, again, you want to stay ahead of the chains. That's something that this team has been plagued with over the past few seasons. And I think they really wanted to focus on changing that. And I think they got 2 running backs who will definitely help do that. Again, this is another example. He's going to avoid the first guy here. And then he's going to show off some of that solid athleticism, I think, where he's able to get to the edge and outrun 2 players before getting tackled. So this is another instance of maybe a different player ends up getting tackled for a loss here or for no gain, but he's able to get a good gain out of it because he has that solid short burst.
Yeah, he really gets on his horse and gets up to speed.
Yeah. He can. I wouldn't say he's like elite speed, but he has more than enough, right? He's not slow, and he can get to that top speed pretty quickly. So it's that acceleration factor. I think it's important. So, again, he's doing this against Florida, so it's not a nothing burger school. So he's going to catch this pass out of the backfield, immediately get hit, but he reacts quickly enough to where he makes that guy miss. Not an easy play to make there, but ends up being a solid gain.
It's like good vision to see that. Like, good vision to see that guy come flying in there. I think that's an underrated aspect of his game, is his vision.
Yeah, he definitely. And you'll see that with how he makes his cuts, especially when he's running up the middle inside, which is not something you normally see from a smaller back, but I think he's very comfortable doing that. And I think he's good at it because he can see those little creases, and he understands positioning of defenders, where they can and can't get past blocks, and he'll use that to his advantage, cutting off guys, using his own players, even if they're not aware of the block that they're actually making. And that's an advanced understanding of how to set guys up, and I think that's really helpful for him. So here's an example of him in pass protection. Again, he doesn't have a lot of power, like you said, but he does try. And I personally think that when he's able to square guys up, he can actually, be helpful in the area. Where I think he struggles sometimes is the awareness of knowing where guys are going to come in through. And that's kind of where, some defenders will get past him. And that's, you can't really have that. But if he can improve his awareness of blitz patterns and things like that, I think he can be a net positive in that regard. But then again, his size is going to limit him there to a certain degree as well. So again, he's just following his blockers, ends up getting hit there, but he spins out of that tackle and he keeps moving forward for the touchdown. Like, it's these little things where, is that the biggest deal in the world if he gets tackled there? No, because he's still, gaining yards, but it ends up being a touchdown because he wins in the margins. And I think that's something that Judkins does as well. And I would hope that they're going to be able to start doing that because they have not done that in quite a long time.
It's just funny because I was listening to some podcasts this week that pretty much kind of said that too, where it was like, I really want them to get back to some of the looks they gave us in 21 and 22 and, and some of the things in late 23. And it's like, you start realizing it's 2+ years since some of this stuff has happened. And you're like, oh God, I'm getting old.
All the players are gone. Like, what?
Somebody posted the other day on Twitter, and I did not appreciate it. An image of like 4 players. One was Philip Rivers.
That was Ryan Roberts. That was Ryan.
It was Ryan?
He did. Yes, he did that, and it made me feel. It was Julio Jones's son.
And Philip Rivers and like
Philip Rivers. Who else was it? Charles Woodson Jr.
Yeah.
And
I'll pull it up.
But yeah, that made me feel really old. It's like, what the heck?
Yeah, I was like,
these
Ryan,
are all the sons of the players that I grew up watching.
The other one was Jason Witten's son.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Thanks, Ryan.
There's a good amount of legacy players in this year's class and next year's class, so it's just ridiculous. All right, this next one is actually going to be him showing off his burst a little bit. So he ends up getting in here for a 25 yard score.
Yeah,
and he could do that. It's not him ripping off a 70-yard touchdown, but that needs burst, especially against a SEC defense. So he can get those chunk plays. Same as Judkins. I think Judkins is more explosive, but they both are good in that regard. And I don't think you're gonna be upset with them for missing a lot of chunk plays because you're too slow. Well, he got 30 yards out of it, so like he's fine.
Am I really that mad about that?
Yeah. Sorry he couldn't outrun the 4-3 safety.
Yeah.
On the back end of the play.
He's like a low 4-4 guy, so it's like I would take low 4-4 all the time.
Right. So again, here's another pass pro rep where he sees this defensive tackle and he's able to actually slow him down because he's got to put probably all of his muscle into it, but he can do it. I wouldn't expect him to be, all right, we got to put Dylan Sampson out on the field as a third down back because he's a fantastic pass protector. But I don't think he's going to be like a a guy where you're okay, we can't play him on passing downs because he cannot block to save his life. So this is I like this play a lot because it's an interesting look because of how much space there is. So he's got two blockers out in space here, but he has the patience to understand that I need to wait for my blockers here, and it ends up being a pretty nice game because he's able to do that. So you can see him like slowing down, waiting, and then it's that little burst, and he ends up turning that into a really nice game. So again, that patience and that vision are on display constantly with him. So now we're against Georgia, so that's an even better defense, and then he does this.
Yep.
Right up the middle. And again, it's that burst where he's able to run away from guys, even though you don't. He doesn't necessarily look that fast, but you suddenly see like, oh, there's a gap widening between him and the last defender. So he must have some sort of speed. This is just your routine, standard up the middle. Oh, surprise. This one's great because he just runs right into the body of people there. You can't even see him. Like, oh, he may have gotten the first down, but he probably got stopped short. And then, oh, there he is. And then here's an example of that negative that you talked about in pass protection, right? So if he's if he's surveying the field here, understanding his role, he needs to see like, all right, there's a couple guys that could be blitzing here. Like you've got at least 4, right, plus the 3 down linemen. So he's got to be aware of this. This one drops back, so he has to keep his eye on these two, and he just doesn't see this guy quickly enough. He's able to get contact, but really he just, bounces him right into the quarterback's pressure path. So, again, smaller things to work on with him, but for a 4th round pick, like, that's fantastic value. And, if they had decided to go a different route earlier in the draft, they didn't take a running back at 36, they ended up getting Samson in the 4th round still. I don't think you could be that upset with them. Like, he's a guy who, if he had to be the main guy in a backfield, I think he'd be fine. Like, he'd be a good 4th round value there. But he doesn't have to do that, right? He can play a different kind of role and be used, I think, more effectively in this offense because they have Judkins now. So I think that pairing is going to be pretty effective, and I'm excited to see what he's able to do.
Yeah, it's kind of, I've been doing these draft revisits, looking at some of the first 4 drafts for Andrew Berry here with the Browns, and it's kind of, you talk about the value of it, and you just remember he's taken in the similar range to when they took Jerome Ford, and it's like, so if he turns out to do some of that stuff and do it a little bit more consistently, you're like, yeah, that's great value. Like, that's what you get in that spot. But now you get to pair a couple of those guys with a top 50 pick, by taking Ford and Samson. And you're like, listen, if this offensive line is healthy and this offensive line can play better now that they're back in the system that they were designed to play, it's like there's some opportunities for these backs to do some cool things. So I'll bring up some stuff here. One thing about Dylan Sampson that you talked about it, kind of the vision and the patience. I love the vision and the patience of Dylan Sampson. Like, you talked about, you see him gear shifting down, letting his blockers get out, and then he makes a cut. It's like, he's not just going to run straight line at full speed unless that's what the defense gives him. If they give him that straight look, you showed it, that touchdown run against Georgia, he just explodes right up the gut. It's like, you give him a seam, and it doesn't need to be a very big seam. If you give him a seam, he's got that speed, he's got that explosive ability to attack. And just like, if he's like, oh, there is literally a straight line right here, okay, I'll take it. but you see a lot of them jump cuts and change of direction things that you are accustomed to with smaller backs. Like they can do some of those things better than some of those bigger, heavier backs. And I think that's relevant when you talk about Dylan Sampson. There was one thing that's a problem. I'm going to show you an example here. So I've got Alabama first here, which, as you said, with Georgia and Florida, these are NFL caliber athletes all over these defenses. So it's not just them beating up on, Sam Houston State or something of that nature. But there's some ball security issues I have when he takes some big hits and stuff. I think he had like 4 fumbles and like 160 carries, which is just a fumble every 50 carries or something like that is what he had. And you don't love that. But that's something that I think can be mitigated, especially in the role that he's in. So you'll see this here. This is a good play and a bad play because you're going to see an example of him getting to the outside, and he loves to turn that corner. If you can get him to that outside and let him turn that corner, those are where those chunk plays come a lot of. Like you talked about it and showed some examples of he likes to find that edge and get around it. But he takes a massive hit at the end of this and he ends up fumbling. So you don't. It's the good. Oh, apparently, if you hit the space bar, it turns that off. I thought that was going to hit play. All right. So it's the good and the bad, the explosiveness, and then he's going to take a couple hits and he ends up being spun around. And Alabama ends up recovering this ball. But and there's some Arkansas tape mixed in here too. I guess I go back and forth. But the thing about that is you see some of that contact balance. He kind of spins off that first hit and he's going forward. There's some ball security things you want to see him clean up. Yep. And that's just an example of it.
Yeah.
So here you go. Just an example of kind of both the burst and the contact balance where he's going to take a hit. He's going to spin off it. He's going to get a couple more yards. Like I said, and I'll show it here later. I don't love when he's running straight at defensive linemen, that kind of power is not there.
Right.
But I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it with him and Judkins. They got guys that find ways to get extra yardage because they haven't been able to do that in years. Going to find the lane, spin forward, gets hit again. Another example here he goes. Now this is when he turns it on. Gets that edge. But see, he is going to get pushed out there. Something you talked about doesn't quite have that fifth gear, so to speak, that Devon A-Chain has with the Dolphins. Doesn't quite have it. But what was that? 35 yards? You okay with 35 yards on an outside shotgun run?
I would think so.
And one thing that I think that may have also led a little bit, because some people are just, well, why was he there? Why was he there? I think part of it is the simple offense that he ran. There's going to be an adjustment period because you're just seeing him. He's pretty much all out of shotgun, just shotgun read, not a lot of under center kind of stuff. And we talk about this all the time with their wide receivers. Tennessee just has a very simplistic offense. So there's going to be a little bit of an adjustment period there.
Yeah.
We've got you've got Cedric Tillman as a prime example. Needed time to adjust because he was not asked to do things in Tennessee. Which is why I'm very interested to see what Nico does, the quarterback transfer at UCLA that went to UCLA. I'm very interested to see what he does there because there were some situations with the simplistic offense that got him, but he was also, he was 20? He's 19 or 20. He's a young guy. Okay. So just another angle here. Him getting out to the outside and then getting on his horse. Can make that cut. He looks there inside first. It's not there. That's fine. I'll get out to the corner. Oh, okay. Here's an example here. And and you'll see him. He's right here at midfield. This is an example you talked about where he was able to spin forward, and he only got a yard or two, but it goes from being a negative yardage play to being a positive yardage. And you can see how far back his quarterback already is. And his quarterback is going to get flushed to the right. His quarterback's going to go out to the right, and he's going to see it, and he's going to settle in here to where the hole in the coverage is, and he's just going to give him an outlet option. And I think it only ends up like 2 or 3 yards because he has to come back. Because there was like a negative yardage play, because you can see here is where the original line of scrimmage is, and he ends up here, but they were behind the chains. But still, either way, he's able to keep this play alive and it be a positive yardage play instead of a negative yardage play.
Yeah.
Another example here of just good vision, patience, let something open, and if you just give him a little sliver of daylight, right? Like just a little sliver of daylight, that's all he needs to give you a positive game. So here's just another example of that. And you see him kind of waiting for that guard to get through there.
He's got that wiggle, yeah.
Yeah. It's like a patience wiggle, which is kind of it sounded better in my head.
That's a great way to describe it.
But here's just an example where if he runs into a pile like that, he's not going to drive it forward, but he also does a decent job of not getting driven back. So he's able to still get like a yard or two, but he's not going to get the 4 or 5 yards in that situation. That's what Judkins is here for.
Yes.
And there he goes, just slipping through the tiniest sliver. Because if you watch it as he gets to the second level here, when he gets through the offensive lineman, you're going to see it be very, very tight. Right there. But he burst through it, and that was like 15 yards. Another example, he's going to get to the outside, and then there he spins, contorts his body, and it kind of backpedals a little bit. You'll see him kind of backpedal a little bit, go forward, remains, wrap him up. Yeah, he's smaller, but like he's got, you can see it there. He just does like a little spin move as he's falling down. He gets like 3 yards. I mean, and you got that in the 4th round. Yeah. There he goes. And then you'll see he ends up getting caught there, which is an example of why you say top-notch speed, but not quite on the elite level, because he gets caught at the third. He gets caught and he falls down at the 3-yard line. But you just watch him, patient, good vision. He sees the lane, and he's able to get on his horse, and he outruns some guys. Just make that cut right there. I love that. The jump cut when he digs his foot into the ground and just changes direction.
Yep.
You see, he goes forward there, but then once he gets gang tackled, he gets pushed down. He's not able to go any further. But another situation where he kind of keeps his footing, could have gone down a little bit earlier, and he kind of makes that play right there. Only problem is when he made his jump cut, there was another defender there that he literally leapt into his arms. So he did his job. There just happened to be a second defender there that was able to end the play there.
It happens.
It's kind of funny too, though. When I was watching it, it's kind of funny because he probably had a laugh about it too, because he's like, I literally jumped into his arms. If that was me, I would have laughed. I'd have been like, well, I was trying, but I landed in this dude's arms. Sliver of daylight, touchdown. If it's there, man, if he can find that lane. And here he is actually showing you a little bit more power than you see most of the time. And I think this is, it's an example there of what I said, where I like the effort, but as a smaller back. Now he hits him, and the pressure comes from the another defender there. But if Nico doesn't go down, if his quarterback, if Iamaialva, no, I know that's not right.
Iamaliava.
Maliava. That's what gets me, the Molly part there. Yep. He goes down from the other defender, but he would have still been pressured by Samson's guy if he had stayed up. Right. But he takes the fight to him. Like, he's willing. And if he gets a little bit more power, and I've talked about it on this show at nauseum, like, I like the ability for the NFL strength and conditioning programs to give some of these guys more strength and power when they come from college. Even if it's just marginal, if he gets a little bit more power, I think this play goes, he maybe is able to hold him up just a little bit longer. But it's effort. It's there. It's, let me try to get it. And it, does hold him up for a second. Like that does happen. And here's an example. He runs right at the defensive line. And he just doesn't go anywhere. It just doesn't. Just as an example of what I mean, like in those types of short yardage, that I would rather go a different direction. Well, that's it, guys. That's another episode in the books as we talk about Dylan Sampson. I didn't say at the beginning of this that we're not live. This is pre-recorded. Maybe I did. I don't know. We'll see. But that's kind of the case. So I hope you guys weren't yelling at me in the comments during this stream and I didn't answer because I was not seeing them. Anyway, so that's Dylan Sampson. Next week, we will talk about Shedeur Sanders, which I'm sure is the one that everyone's waiting for. And then we're going to shift base and kind of talk about some other players. So we really appreciate you. Make sure you stay locked in over at theobr.com. Jeff Lloyd back tomorrow, 6 o'clock, Browns 3D, and then the React at 7 with Brad and Pete. And stay locked into the OBR. We appreciate you guys so much, and we will see you next time.